own son handed me forged psychiatric commitment papers while I was enjoying breakfast in what I thought was a luxury spa in Barcelona. I smiled, signed them with a flourish, and 2 hours later found myself locked in a foreign mental institution. But Brandon forgot one crucial detail about his dear old mother. I didn't survive 30 years of marriage to his manipulative father without learning a few tricks of my own. Comment your city below and subscribe to stay connected. Time to dive into the story. Let me back up and tell you how a perfectly planned mother-son bonding trip turned into the most expensive mistake of my children's lives. 3 weeks ago, I was just Margaret Harrison, recent widow, sitting in my Phoenix living room, wondering what to do with the rest of my life. Then Brandon showed up with his wife Amber, all smiles and concern, talking about how I needed a change of scenery after Dad's funeral. How thoughtful of them to plan an all-expenses-paid trip to Spain. I should have known something was wrong when Amber actually volunteered to help me pack. "Mom, you're going to love this place," Brandon said, squeezing my hand as our taxi pulled up to what looked like a medical facility disguised as a resort. The Serenity Wellness Center specializes in helping people your age transition to their next life chapter. Their next life chapter. At 62, apparently, I was already being written off as someone whose story was nearly finished. The irony wasn't lost on me that my own children thought I needed help transitioning when they were the ones about to need all the help they could get. The building was gorgeous, I'll give them that. White stone walls, perfectly manicured gardens, fountain in the courtyard. Very expensive looking, very convincing. The kind of place that would make anyone feel safe and cared for, right up until the moment they realized they'd been had. "Mrs. Harrison, welcome," said Dr. Martinez, a thin man in an expensive suit who appeared the moment we walked through the doors. "We've been expecting you." Of course they had. My son had been planning this for months, probably since the moment Dad's will was read and he learned I'd inherited everything. All $2.3 million of it, plus the house, plus Dad's life insurance. Quite a motivator for filial devotion. "The grounds are beautiful," I told Dr. Martinez, "because what else do you say when you're being led like a lamb to slaughter? How long has this facility been operating?" "Oh, we've been helping families like yours for many years," he replied smoothly. "Transitions can be difficult, but we make them as comfortable as possible." Amber linked her arm through mine, playing the devoted daughter-in-law. "We researched dozens of places, Mom Margaret. This one has the best reputation for people dealing with adjustments. Adjustments. There was that word again. I was starting to hate it almost as much as I was starting to hate them. They showed me to my room. Spacious, pleasant, with a beautiful view of the gardens. Amber helped me unpack while Brandon spoke quietly with Dr. Martinez in the hallway. I could catch fragments of their conversation through the thin walls. "The paperwork is all in order. American consulate, temporary guardianship, medical necessity. Medical necessity. For a woman who just buried her husband of 35 years, but was otherwise perfectly healthy. I felt my blood pressure rising, but I kept my expression calm, pleasant. Let them think their plan was working perfectly. "Mom, we hate to leave you here alone," Brandon said when they returned to my room. "But Amber and I have some business to take care of in Madrid. We'll be back in a few days to check on you." "Take your time," I said sweetly. "I'm sure I'll be just fine here." Oh, I was going to be more than fine. I was going to be spectacular. But first, I needed to figure out exactly what game they were playing and how deep this betrayal went. As I watched their taxi disappear down the tree-lined drive, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, focused anger. And it felt wonderful. That evening at dinner, I struck up conversations with other guests. What I learned made my blood run cold. This wasn't a wellness center. It was a private psychiatric facility that specialized in difficult family situations. Half the people here had been committed by relatives who stood to inherit from them. The other half were genuinely ill and had no idea what was happening around them. "How long have you been here?" I asked Elena, a woman about my age who spoke English with a slight accent. 8 months, she said sadly. "My daughter says I need treatment for dementia, but I remember everything perfectly. I just can't prove it because they control all communication with the outside world." 8 months. I felt sick thinking about what my children had planned for me, but I also felt something else. Determination. Whatever papers they'd had me sign, whatever lies they'd told about my mental state, I was getting out of here. And when I did, they were going to learn exactly how lucid their mother really was. The next morning brought my first real taste of what Brandon and Amber had arranged for me. Dr. Martinez appeared at my room at 7 a.m. with a cheerful smile and a clipboard full of documents. Mrs. Harrison, we need to complete your intake evaluation today. Just some standard paperwork to ensure we provide the best possible care. I glanced at the forms. Commitment authorization, treatment consent, financial power of attorney transfer. My son hadn't just had me institutionalized. He'd been setting up to control my entire estate while I was locked away. Dr. Martinez, I said, putting on my most confused expression, I'm afraid my reading glasses are broken. Could you just tell me what these papers say? I trust you completely. His smile became patronizing. Of course, Mrs. Harrison. These are simply formalities. Your son explained that you've been having some memory issues since your husband's death. These documents ensure he can handle your financial affairs while you focus on recovering. Memory issues. Right. The only thing I couldn't remember was raising a son capable of this level of betrayal. I signed everything with a shaky hand, playing the part of a confused, grieving widow. But as I wrote my name, I was memorizing every detail, the legal language, the witness signatures, the official seals. If these documents were forgeries, I'd need proof. If they were legitimate, I'd need to understand exactly how my rights had been signed away. After the paperwork session, Dr. Martinez introduced me to my treatment team, a psychiatrist who didn't speak English well enough to conduct a proper evaluation, a social worker who'd clearly never met me before, but had extensive notes about my deteriorating mental state, a nurse who looked at me like I might become violent at any moment. Mrs. Harrison has been experiencing significant cognitive decline, the psychiatrist Dr. Vega read from a file. According to her family, she's shown increasing paranoia, memory loss, and inability to manage daily tasks. I sat quietly while they discussed my supposed symptoms. Paranoid delusions about family members trying to steal from her, forgetting to pay bills, getting lost while driving, talking to her deceased husband as if he were still alive. Every single symptom was a lie, but they were specific lies, detailed lies, the kind that could only come from someone who knew me well and had spent time thinking about how to destroy my credibility. My own son had crafted a fictional version of my mental state that was thorough enough to convince medical professionals. We'll start you on a mild sedative, Dr. Vega continued, to help with the anxiety and confusion. Many patients find it helps them adjust to their new living situation. Sedatives. Of course. Keep the inconvenient mother drugged and compliant while her devoted children emptied her bank accounts. I nodded and smiled, but inside, I was calculating. How long would it take them to drug me into actual incompetence? How quickly could I get word to someone on the outside? How many laws were they breaking, and could I prove it? That afternoon, during what they called therapeutic recreation time, I made my first ally. Maria Santos was a janitor who'd been working at the facility for 6 years. She spoke excellent English and had a daughter back home in Mexico who she supported with her salary. Mrs. Harrison, she said quietly while mopping the floor near where I sat reading, you don't seem like the others. I looked up, meeting her eyes carefully. What do you mean? The ones whose families bring them here, they're usually, she gestured vaguely, different, confused. You seem very aware of everything. Maria was taking a risk by talking to me. Staff weren't supposed to question patient commitments, but something about my situation bothered her, and I needed to find out what she knew. Maria, can I ask you something? In your experience, how often do patients leave here? Her expression darkened. The ones with dementia? Never. The ones whose families pay for long-term care? Almost never. But you? She glanced around to make sure we weren't being observed. You should know that Dr. Martinez received a very large payment from your son, more than the usual fees. A large payment. So this wasn't just about getting me out of the way. It was about making sure I stayed out of the way permanently. My children hadn't just betrayed me. They'd bought and paid for my disappearance. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated exactly how sharp their target really was. By day 3, I had the facility's routine memorized and a plan forming. Morning medications at 8 a.m., which I'd been hiding under my tongue and spitting out later. Therapy sessions at 10, where I played increasingly confused to encourage the staff's belief that the drugs were working. Lunch at noon, when most of the security guards took their break. Afternoon rec time at 2, when Maria worked the second floor where the administrative offices were located. The keycard system was sophisticated, but not impenetrable. Each staff member had access cards that worked on different doors, depending on their clearance level. Dr. Martinez could go anywhere. Nurses could access patient areas and the medical offices. Maintenance staff like Maria could go almost everywhere except the main administrative wing. But there was one door that didn't require a key card, the emergency exit in the laundry room. I discovered it during my first night when I couldn't sleep and went wandering. The door had an alarm, but it was the kind that could be bypassed if you knew what you were doing. And thanks to 35 years married to an engineer who loved explaining security systems, I knew exactly what to do. The real challenge wasn't getting out of the building. It was getting to the American consulate in Barcelona with proof of what had been done to me. I needed those commitment papers, the financial documents, evidence of the payments Brandon had made. Without proof, I'd just be another confused elderly woman making wild accusations about her caring family. That's where Maria became invaluable. "The papers you signed," she said during our third careful conversation. "Dr. Martinez keeps copies in his office, along with correspondence from families, payment records, everything." "How do you know that?" "Because I clean his office. And because I've been watching this place destroy families for 6 years. Some of us who work here, we see what really happens." Maria wasn't the only staff member who had concerns about the facility's practices. There was a whole network of janitors, kitchen workers, and lower-level nurses who'd witnessed too many suspicious commitments to believe they were all legitimate. They'd just never had anyone with the resources and determination to do something about it. "If I could get into that office," I said carefully, "would you be able to help?" Maria was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Harrison, if you're caught trying to escape, they'll move you to the secure wing. Patients in the secure wing never leave. Then I won't get caught." That night, while the facility slept under its minimal night staffing, I put my plan into action. The laundry room was on the ground floor, accessible through a service corridor that ran behind the kitchen. At 2 a.m., the night shift had only 3 guards, one at the main entrance, one making rounds, and one monitoring the security cameras from the central station. The camera monitoring was the weak point. The guards rotated shifts every 4 hours, and during the changeover, there was always a 15-minute gap while the new guard got settled and reviewed the night's incident reports. I'd timed it precisely for 3 nights running. I disabled the emergency door alarm using my deceased husband's favorite trick, a small piece of electrical tape over the magnetic contact. As long as the tape stayed in place, the system would read the door as closed even when it was open. Simple, effective, and nearly invisible unless someone was looking for it. Getting back in would be the real challenge, but I'd solved that problem too. Maria had agreed to unlock one of the ground floor windows in the recreation room at 6 a.m., just before her shift ended. A small window that was partially concealed by landscaping and out of view from the main security cameras. The walk to the road was longer than it had looked from my room window, but at 3 a.m. there was no traffic and no witnesses. I'd changed into the darkest clothes I'd brought, navy slacks and a black sweater that would help me blend into the shadows. 40 minutes later, I was standing outside a 24-hour internet cafe in the small town near the facility. My credit card still worked. Apparently, Brandon hadn't moved to freeze my accounts yet. Overconfident of him. He'd probably assumed I'd be too drugged and confused to cause any trouble for weeks. Time to prove him wrong. I spent the next 3 hours researching Spanish commitment laws, locating the nearest American consulate, and most importantly, finding a lawyer in Barcelona who specialized in international legal disputes involving American citizens. Dr. Carmen Ruiz had handled several cases involving questionable psychiatric commitments and had a reputation for taking on institutions that preyed on vulnerable patients. By 6 a.m., I was back in the facility in my room, pretending to sleep. When the morning medication round began, I dutifully took my pills and dutifully spit them out the moment the nurse left. Maria found the electrical tape on the emergency door during her morning rounds and disposed of it without comment. As far as anyone knew, I'd never left the building. But I had left a trail of digital breadcrumbs that would soon reach very interested parties in both Barcelona and Phoenix. My children thought they'd silenced me by locking me away. Instead, they'd given me exactly the motivation I needed to bring down their entire scheme. Dr. Carmen Ruiz arrived at the Serenity Wellness Center on Thursday morning with a briefcase full of legal documents and an expression that could freeze hell. I watched through my window as she parked her car and strode toward the main entrance like a woman with a mission, which she was. My late-night emails had accomplished exactly what I'd hoped. Dr. Ruiz had contacted the American consulate, who had demanded an immediate wellness check on an American citizen who'd reported being illegally committed. The Spanish authorities had questions about the facility's documentation. And most importantly, Brandon and Amber were about to get a very unpleasant surprise. "Mrs. Harrison," Dr. Martinez appeared at my door, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "You have visitors. Legal visitors." I put on my best confused expression. "Legal? Did I do something wrong, doctor? I can't remember." No, Mrs. Harrison. These are advocates. They want to speak with you about your stay here, doctor." Ruiz was everything I'd hoped she'd be. Sharp, thorough, and absolutely furious about what she'd discovered during her preliminary investigation of my case. "Mrs. Harrison," she said, taking a seat across from me in the visitor's room, "I need to ask you some very direct questions. Are you being held here against your will?" I think my son brought me here for my own good," I said, maintaining my act while Dr. Martinez hovered nearby. "I've been having some memory problems since my husband died." "I see. And do you remember signing any legal documents when you arrived?" "Documents?" "Oh, yes. Dr. Martinez had me sign some papers. But I couldn't read them clearly. My glasses are broken." I gestured helplessly. Dr. Ruiz made notes, but I could see recognition in her eyes. She knew exactly what I was doing, playing the part while giving her the information she needed. "Mrs. Harrison, would you like me to help you contact your family to discuss your care?" "Oh, that would be wonderful. My son Brandon is in Madrid on business. He and his wife Amber are such good children to arrange this lovely place for me." More notes. Dr. Ruiz was building a case, and every confused, compliant answer I gave her was ammunition. Because the more incompetent I appeared, the more illegal my commitment became under Spanish law. After Dr. Ruiz left, things moved quickly. By afternoon, Spanish social services had arrived to conduct their own evaluation. By evening, the American consulate had sent a representative to interview me. And somewhere in Madrid, my children were getting emergency phone calls from lawyers they'd never heard of. But the real surprise came the next morning. "Mom?" Brandon's voice came through on the facility phone, tight with stress. "I just got a call from some Spanish lawyer. She says there are questions about your commitment papers." "Oh, Brandon, sweetheart," I said, injecting just the right amount of confusion and distress into my voice. "I'm so sorry if I caused any trouble. I don't remember talking to any lawyers. These doctors say my memory isn't very good anymore. Mom, listen to me very carefully. If anyone asks you questions, just tell them you're happy there and getting good care. Can you do that for me?" "Of course, dear. But Brandon, when are you coming to visit? I miss you. We'll be there tomorrow. Just don't sign anything else, okay? And don't talk to any more lawyers without me there." After I hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. Brandon was panicking, which meant his lawyers had told him exactly how much trouble he was in. International kidnapping, false imprisonment, elder abuse, fraud. The list of potential charges was impressive, but I wasn't done yet. My children had tried to erase me from my own life, and they were about to learn that Margaret Harrison didn't erase easily. That evening, Maria brought me something that made my day complete. Photocopies of the documents from Dr. Martinez's office. Payment records showing Brandon had transferred $50,000 to the facility. Correspondence discussing long-term care options for patients whose families wanted permanent placement. And most damning of all, a psychiatric evaluation that had been written before I'd even arrived at the facility. The evaluation that supposedly documented my deteriorating mental state was dated 3 days before I'd left Phoenix, which would have been impressive since I'd never been examined by any psychiatrist. Brandon had paid for forged medical documents to support my illegal commitment. He'd bribed a foreign facility to hold me indefinitely. And he'd done it all while pretending to be a loving son, concerned about his mother's welfare. Tomorrow, when he and Amber arrived for their visit, they were walking into a trap. The Spanish authorities would be waiting. The American consulate would have questions. And their confused, helpless mother would suddenly become very articulate about exactly what had been done to her. But the real surprise would come later, when they returned to Phoenix and discovered what I'd accomplished during my supposedly helpless weeks locked away in Spain. Brandon and Amber arrived at the facility Friday morning, looking like they hadn't slept in days. Good. I'd been sleeping beautifully, even without the sedatives they thought I'd been taking. Amazing how well you rest when you know justice is about to be served. Mrs. Harrison, Dr. Martinez said, ushering them into the visiting room where I waited. Your son and daughter-in-law are here to see you. I looked up with the expression of someone whose medication was making everything fuzzy. Brandon? Oh, sweetheart, you came back. I was so worried I'd done something wrong. The doctors keep asking me questions I can't remember the answers to. Brandon shot a sharp look at Dr. Martinez. What kind of questions? Oh, about why I'm here, and who brought me, and whether I want to stay. I pressed my hand to my forehead dramatically. It's all so confusing. I told them you know what's best for me. Amber squeezed my hand with fake warmth. Mom, Margaret, you haven't signed any more papers, have you? Sometimes places like this try to get patients to sign things they don't understand. I don't think so, dear. Although that nice lawyer lady did ask me to sign something yesterday. But I told her I couldn't see clearly without my glasses. The blood drained from Brandon's face. What lawyer? Before I could answer, Dr. Carmen Ruiz walked into the room, accompanied by 2 Spanish officials and a representative from the American consulate. Mr. Harrison, Dr. Ruiz said crisply, I'm Carmen Ruiz, representing your mother in matters related to her commitment to this facility. We need to discuss some irregularities in the documentation you provided. Brandon stood up slowly, his lawyer instincts kicking in even as his face went pale. I'm not sure what you mean. My mother agreed to treatment here. We have all the proper paperwork. Yes, let's talk about that paperwork. Dr. Ruiz opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Specifically, the psychiatric evaluation dated 3 days before your mother left the United States. The evaluation supposedly conducted by Dr. James Morrison of Phoenix General Hospital. She looked directly at Brandon. Dr. Morrison has never heard of your mother. In fact, he was attending a medical conference in Seattle during the dates listed on this evaluation. Amber's hand tightened around mine, her nails digging in. I looked at her with wide, confused eyes. Amber, dear, you're hurting me. We also have questions about the financial arrangements, the consulate representative added. Specifically, the $50,000 payment made to this facility before your mother was admitted. That's well above standard fees for the level of care provided. Brandon was sweating now. I wanted to ensure Mom received the best possible treatment. Money wasn't an object. How thoughtful, Doctor. Ruiz said dryly. And the power of attorney documents giving you control over her assets while she's receiving this treatment? Standard precautions. Mom has been showing signs of cognitive decline since Dad's death. Someone needs to manage her finances. That's when I decided it was time to drop my confused act. Actually, Brandon, I said, my voice suddenly clear and strong, someone has been managing my finances, but it wasn't cognitive decline that necessitated it. The room went dead silent. Brandon stared at me like I'd risen from the grave. Mom? Amber whispered. I've been fully aware of everything that's been happening here. The forged medical documents, the illegal commitment, the plan to keep me locked away while you emptied my bank accounts. I smiled at them both. What you didn't count on was that your mother isn't nearly as helpless as you thought. Brandon found his voice. You've been faking? This whole time? Oh, sweetheart, I haven't been faking anything. I really was confused. Confused about how I could have raised a son capable of this level of betrayal. Dr. Ruiz was taking notes furiously. The Spanish officials were speaking quietly into their radios, and my children were finally seeing their mother clearly for the first time in their adult lives. But here's what's really going to confuse you, I continued. While you've been congratulating yourselves on your clever scheme, I've been busy making some arrangements of my own. I pulled out my phone, the one they thought I was too confused to use properly. I had a lovely conversation with my lawyer in Phoenix yesterday. Turns out that attempting to have someone falsely committed for financial gain is considered elder abuse under Arizona law. The penalties are quite severe. Amber was crying now. Real tears, not the crocodile tears she'd used to manipulate me for years. Your house is currently being searched by investigators, I continued. Your financial records are being audited, and your attempt to access my bank accounts while I was supposedly incapacitated triggered some very interesting fraud alerts. Brandon slumped into his chair like a deflated balloon. Mom, we can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can. You're both very good at explanations. Very creative with the truth. I stood up, feeling stronger and more clear-headed than I had in years. But you know what? I don't actually want to hear your explanations anymore. I turned to Dr. Ruiz. I'd like to press charges for false imprisonment, elder abuse, fraud, and anything else you think might apply. She smiled grimly. It will be my pleasure to help you with that, Mrs. Harrison. As Brandon and Amber were led away by Spanish authorities, I realized something profound had changed. For the first time in decades, I felt truly free. Free from their manipulation, their false concern, their constant undermining of my independence. They'd tried to erase Margaret Harrison from her own life. Instead, they'd awakened someone they'd never met, a woman who was done being anyone's victim. And I was just getting started. The flight back to Phoenix gave me 8 hours to plan my next moves. Brandon and Amber were facing extradition proceedings in Spain, but that was just the appetizer. The main course would be served when I got home and discovered exactly how deep their betrayal went. My first stop wasn't home. It was the law office of Patricia Williams, the attorney I'd hired during my midnight internet research session. Patricia was everything her reputation promised. Sharp, thorough, and absolutely delighted to take on a case involving international elder abuse. Mrs. Harrison, she said, reviewing the files I'd compiled, what your son did constitutes multiple federal crimes. But I have to warn you, proving financial elder abuse can be complicated when family members have legitimate access to accounts. That's what I was afraid you'd say. But Patricia, I think there's more to discover. Brandon didn't cook up this scheme overnight. This level of planning, the forged documents, the international facility arrangements, he had help. What kind of help? I pulled out a folder I'd been putting together during the flight. Brandon's wife Amber works for Fletcher & Associates, a financial planning firm. His best friend Marcus is a psychiatrist. His neighbor Karen Wright is a paralegal who specializes in elder law. Quite a convenient collection of professional connections. Patricia's eyebrows rose. You think this was a conspiracy? I think my son assembled a team of experts to help him steal my inheritance legally. And I think they've done this before. We spent the next 3 hours going through my financial records, looking for any suspicious activity from the past year. What we found was even worse than I'd expected. Small transfers that I'd never authorized, investment changes I'd never agreed to, and most damning of all, a new life insurance policy taken out in my name 6 months ago, with Brandon as the sole beneficiary. Margaret, Patricia said quietly, this policy has a double indemnity clause for accidental death or death by natural causes in a foreign country. The room went cold. They hadn't just planned to steal my money while I was locked away in Spain. They'd been planning for me to die there. How much is the policy worth? $1.5 million. Combined with your existing assets, Brandon would have inherited over $4 million if you'd died in that facility. I sat back in my chair, processing this revelation. My own son hadn't just betrayed me. He'd been planning my murder, disguised as natural causes brought on by the stress of foreign institutionalization, but murder nonetheless. Patricia, I want to know everything. Every person who helped him, every document they forged, every law they broke, and I want them all held accountable. That's going to require a comprehensive investigation. The FBI will need to get involved given the international elements. Then call them. By evening, I was sitting in my own living room for the first time in 2 weeks, but it felt like a foreign place. Everything looked the same, but knowing what had been planned here, what conversations had taken place about my future, made me feel like I was sitting in a crime scene. My phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Martinez from the Phoenix Police Department's Elder Abuse Unit. Mrs. Harrison, we've finished our preliminary search of your son's residence. You need to see what we found. 20 minutes later, I was standing in Brandon's home office. looking at evidence that made my blood run cold. A detailed timeline of my husband's final illness, research on accelerated inheritance procedures, and most chilling of all, a folder labeled Contingency Plans that outlined 3 different scenarios for what they called resolving the Margaret situation. Option 1 was the Spanish facility, isolate and control until natural death occurred. Option 2 was having me declared incompetent and placed in a secured care facility in the U.S. Option 3 was what they euphemistically called medical intervention during travel. Mrs. Harrison, Detective Martinez said gently, "We need to discuss protection arrangements for you. If your son posted bail—" "He won't," I said firmly. "His passport has been confiscated, and the Spanish authorities aren't releasing him until the extradition hearing. But his associates are still here, and they have just as much to lose as he does." That night, as I sat in my house under police protection, I realized that exposing Brandon and Amber was just the beginning. There was a whole network of people who'd helped plan my disappearance, and they were still out there, probably planning damage control. But they'd made the same mistake my son had made. They'd underestimated Margaret Harrison, and I was about to show them all exactly how costly that miscalculation would be. Dr. Marcus Webb looked nothing like the monster I'd been expecting. Sitting across from me in the FBI interview room, he appeared to be exactly what he claimed to be, a concerned family friend who'd tried to help Brandon get appropriate care for his mentally declining mother. "Mrs. Harrison," he said with practiced empathy, "I want you to know that everything I recommended was based on Brandon's descriptions of your behavior. If he misled me about your condition, then I'm as much a victim here as you are." Special Agent Linda Cooper, who'd been assigned to lead the conspiracy investigation, made notes while maintaining a neutral expression, but I could see she wasn't buying Marcus's innocent act any more than I was. "Dr. Webb," I said pleasantly, "could you explain how you diagnosed my condition without ever examining me?" "I didn't diagnose anything. I simply provided Brandon with general information about facilities that treat age-related cognitive decline. General information that included specific recommendations for foreign institutions that specialize in long-term involuntary commitment." His composure flickered slightly. Brandon was concerned about privacy issues. He felt a domestic facility might not provide the discretion your family needed. Discretion. Interesting word choice. I opened the folder Agent Cooper had given me. "Dr. Webb, are you familiar with Elena Vasquez, Thomas Chen, and Dorothy Miller?" "I don't believe so. They're 3 other patients who were committed to foreign facilities based on your recommendations over the past 2 years. All of them had substantial inheritances. All of them died within 6 months of commitment." The room went very quiet. Marcus's lawyer, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. "My client has no knowledge of any other cases beyond his consultation with Mr. Harrison." "That's strange," Agent Cooper interjected, "because your phone records show 17 calls to the Serenity Wellness Center over the past 18 months. That's quite a lot of contact for someone who only provided general information to one family." I watched Marcus's face carefully as the walls closed in around him. This man had helped orchestrate the deaths of at least 3 other people, and he'd nearly added me to that list. "There's something else," I said, pulling out another document. "The life insurance policy Brandon took out on me? The application includes a medical history that could only have come from someone with access to my actual medical records." Marcus's lawyer was furiously taking notes now. "Mrs. Harrison, are you suggesting my client illegally accessed confidential medical information?" "I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it as fact. Dr. Webb accessed my records through the hospital system where he has privileges, then used that information to help Brandon create a credible medical history for the insurance application." Agent Cooper nodded. Computer forensics confirmed that Dr. Webb accessed Mrs. Harrison's medical records 14 times in the 3 months before she left for Spain. He also accessed records for Elena Vasquez, Thomas Chen, and Dorothy Miller. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of Marcus's lawyer's pen frantically scratching across his legal pad. "Dr. Webb," I continued, "how much did Brandon pay you for your expertise? Was it a flat fee, or did you get a percentage of the inheritance?" "I think this interview is over," his lawyer said quickly. "Actually, it's just getting started," Agent Cooper replied. "Dr. Webb, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse. insurance fraud, and computer crimes, and those are just the federal charges. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, I felt a grim satisfaction. One down, but the investigation was revealing more conspirators than I'd originally suspected. Amber's boss at Fletcher & Associates had helped structure the financial transfers. Karen Wright had provided legal guidance on commitment procedures, and there were others, a whole network of professionals who'd turned elder abuse into a profitable side business. But the most shocking revelation came that evening when Agent Cooper called me at home. "Mrs. Harrison, we've been analyzing the financial records from all the connected cases. The money stolen from victims wasn't just divided among the conspirators. Most of it went to fund something much larger." "What kind of something?" "A company called Golden Years Consulting. It's marketed as a service that helps families navigate care options for aging parents. But it's actually a sophisticated operation that identifies wealthy seniors, manufactures medical crises, and then profits from their institutionalization or death." I sat down heavily. "How many victims are we talking about?" "So far, we've identified 12 definitive cases over 3 years, but we think there may be dozens more." My son hadn't just betrayed me personally. He'd been part of an enterprise that was systematically targeting and destroying elderly people across the country. People like me who'd worked their whole lives to build something for their families, only to have those families turn that love into a weapon against them. "Agent Cooper," I said, "what can I do to help you catch all of them?" "Actually, Mrs. Harrison, we have a proposal for you, and it's going to require you to be braver than you've ever been before." The plan Agent Cooper outlined was audacious, dangerous, and exactly what I needed to ensure justice was served. Golden Years Consulting was holding their annual Professional Development Retreat in 2 weeks, a gathering where they shared strategies for identifying vulnerable targets and maximizing profits from elder exploitation. "We want you to attend as bait," Agent Cooper explained during our planning session. "You'll pose as a wealthy recent widow looking for advice on protecting your assets from potentially greedy family members. The goal is to get them to reveal their methods on tape. Essentially, I'll be shopping for services to protect myself from people like my own son." "Exactly. But Mrs. Harrison, I need you to understand the risks. If they suspect you're working with us, or if they recognize you from the news coverage of Brandon's arrest, they'll try to eliminate me permanently." I finished her thought. "Agent Cooper, these people planned my murder. The least I can do is help ensure they can't do it to anyone else." The retreat was being held at an exclusive resort in Scottsdale, the kind of place where wealthy retirees go to spend their golden years in comfort and security. The irony wasn't lost on me that these predators had chosen a venue designed to represent everything they were destroying. I spent a week preparing for my role. Patricia Williams helped me create a fake identity, Eleanor Blackwood, recently widowed, inheritor of a tech fortune, and supposedly paranoid about her stepchildren's intentions. Agent Cooper's team provided me with sophisticated recording equipment and a detailed backstory that would withstand scrutiny. But the most important preparation was psychological. I had to present myself as the kind of vulnerable target these people preyed upon while actually being strong enough to outwit them. It was a delicate balance between appearing weak and staying alert. The retreat attendees were exactly what I'd expected: well-dressed professionals who'd found a way to monetize human misery. Doctors, lawyers, financial planners, even funeral directors who specialized in expediting family transitions during difficult times. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the retreat coordinator, welcomed me warmly during registration. "Eleanor, I understand you're dealing with some family complications regarding your inheritance. My late husband's children have made it very clear they think I'm too old to manage significant assets," I said, injecting just the right amount of worry into my voice. "I need to know what options I have to protect myself." "You've come to the right place. We specialize in helping people in situations exactly like yours." The presentations were chilling. Workshop titles included Medical Documentation for Expedited Competency Challenges, International Care Facility Placement, and Asset Protection During Family Transitions. Each session was essentially a how-to guide for stealing from elderly people while maintaining legal cover. During the lunch break, I found myself sitting with 3 other clients, all wealthy widows who'd been referred by family members. What I learned from them made me sick. My daughter brought me here, said Janet Morrison, a 74-year-old from Tucson. She says I need to be more realistic about my future care needs. But honestly, I feel fine. Same here, added Patricia Wells. My son-in-law is very concerned about my financial management. He thinks I should simplify my affairs. These women were being set up for the same treatment I'd narrowly escaped. Their own families had brought them here to be evaluated as potential targets. That afternoon session was led by Dr. Marcus Webb's replacement, a smooth-talking psychiatrist named Dr. James Morrison, who specialized in rapid cognitive assessments for time-sensitive family situations. Ladies, he told our group, the key to protecting yourself is recognizing when you're no longer capable of making sound decisions. Many people resist help because they don't realize their judgment has been compromised. He was literally teaching these women to doubt their own mental competence while he evaluated them as potential victims. But the most damning session came that evening, when Dr. Rebecca Chen addressed the professional attendees in what she thought was a private meeting. Thanks to Agent Cooper's surveillance team, I was able to listen to the entire presentation from my room. This year's client pool shows excellent potential, she said, reviewing profiles of the widows they'd identified. Eleanor Blackwood in particular represents a high-value opportunity. Recent bereavement, substantial assets, and stepchildren who've already expressed concern about her judgment. They weren't just planning to help my fake stepchildren steal from me. They were planning to help them kill me. The Blackwood case will require our full international package, Dr. Morrison added. Given the asset size, we'll want to ensure complete resolution within 6 months. Complete resolution. Their euphemism for murder. As I sat in my luxury hotel room, listening to these monsters plan the death of my fictional identity, I realized that bringing down Brandon and his immediate co-conspirators hadn't been enough. Golden Years Consulting was a machine designed to destroy people like me, and it had been operating successfully for years. But tomorrow, that machine was going to meet its match. Because Eleanor Blackwood might be a vulnerable target, but Margaret Harrison was about to end their operation permanently. The next morning brought a development I hadn't expected. Agent Cooper called my room at 6 a.m. with news that changed everything. Mrs. Harrison, we have a problem. Brandon made bail. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. How is that possible? He's facing extradition to Spain. His lawyer filed an emergency appeal claiming medical necessity. Apparently, Amber suffered a breakdown in Spanish custody, and Brandon convinced a judge that he needed to be released to arrange psychiatric care for his wife. That's ridiculous. He can arrange care from jail. The judge disagreed. Brandon's been released on $2 million bond with electronic monitoring and surrender of his passport. But Mrs. Harrison, there's something else. We think he knows about the operation. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Someone tipped off Golden Years Consulting about our investigation. They've moved up their timeline for the retreat. Instead of spreading activities over 3 days, they're compressing everything into today. And they've added a new session specifically focused on the Eleanor Blackwood case. I got dressed quickly while Agent Cooper explained the new situation. Brandon's release had somehow triggered a panic within the conspiracy. They were accelerating their plans, which meant they intended to neutralize the Eleanor Blackwood threat before she could cause problems. We can extract you now, Agent Cooper said. We have enough evidence to prosecute the core group, but not enough to save the other women here. Janet, Patricia, and the others. If I leave, they'll still be targeted. Mrs. Harrison, this isn't your responsibility. Yes, it is. Brandon didn't just betray me personally. He became part of something that's destroyed families across the country. If I can stop that, then everything I've been through will have meant something. 2 hours later, I was sitting in what Golden Years Consulting called an individual assessment session with Dr. Morrison and financial planner David Chen. They thought they were evaluating Eleanor Blackwood's vulnerability. Actually, they were confessing to a room full of hidden recording equipment. Eleanor, Dr. Morrison said with false warmth, we've reviewed your situation, and we believe you're at significant risk from your stepchildren. They clearly see you as an obstacle to their inheritance. What kind of risk? I asked. Playing scared. Legal challenges to your competency. Attempts to have you declared unable to manage your own affairs. In extreme cases, they might even try to have you institutionalized. David Chen leaned forward. The good news is that we can protect you. We have arrangements with secure facilities that cater to people in your exact situation. Secure facilities? Private care centers where you'd be safe from family interference while your assets are protected through specialized trusts. They were describing exactly what had been planned for me in Spain. A secure facility where I'd be held until I died, while they looted my estate. How would that work financially? I asked. We'd establish a series of trusts that protect your wealth from family challenges, while ensuring you receive excellent care for the rest of your life. And who would manage these trusts? David smiled. Our professional team would handle all the complex details. You wouldn't need to worry about anything. They were literally describing how they'd steal everything I owned while keeping me locked away until I died. But then Dr. Morrison said something that made my heart stop. Eleanor, I should mention that we're familiar with your situation through a mutual acquaintance. Brandon Harrison spoke very highly of our services. The room spun. Brandon wasn't just a client of Golden Years Consulting. He was actively referring them new targets. Even from jail, he was still trying to have me killed. Brandon Harrison? I managed to say. A wonderful young man who recently helped his mother transition to appropriate care. Very forward-thinking about family financial planning. They didn't know Brandon was my son. They thought Eleanor Blackwood and Margaret Harrison were different people, which meant Brandon had recommended me as a target for the same treatment he'd tried to arrange in Spain. I'd love to meet Mr. Harrison, I said carefully. Could you arrange an introduction? Actually, Dr. Morrison said, checking his phone, he's here at the resort today. Legal complications with his mother's estate, but he wanted to support our mission despite his personal troubles. Brandon was here, at the same retreat where they were planning to murder his fake target. The audacity was breathtaking. There's one more thing, David Chen added. Given the urgency of your stepchildren's threats, we'd recommend immediate placement. We could have you transferred to a secure facility as early as tonight. Tonight. They were planning to kidnap me tonight, exactly as they'd done to Janet, Patricia, and countless others. But what they didn't know was that Margaret Harrison had learned a lot about fighting back over the past 3 weeks. And tonight, instead of becoming their victim, I was going to become their worst nightmare. That sounds perfect, I told them with a grateful smile. I can't tell you how relieved I am to have found people who really understand what I'm going through. Dr. Morrison and David Chen exchanged satisfied looks. In their minds, Eleanor Blackwood had just agreed to hand over her fortune and her life. They had no idea they'd just confessed their entire operation to the FBI. NARS. At 9 p.m., everything came together in the resort's private dining room. Golden Years Consulting had arranged what they called a celebration dinner for their new client acquisition, me. What they'd actually arranged was their own destruction. The attendees included everyone who'd been involved in planning my fake murder. Dr. Morrison, David Chen, Dr. Rebecca Chen, and 3 other professionals who specialized in different aspects of elder exploitation. And sitting at the head of the table, looking confident and smug, was my son Brandon. Eleanor, Brandon said as I entered the room, Rebecca tells me you're interested in our family consultation services. I looked directly into his eyes, the same brown eyes I'd gazed into when he was a baby, when I'd rocked him to sleep and sung lullabies and promised him I'd always protect him from anything that tried to hurt him. Now those same eyes were evaluating me as prey. Mr. Harrison, I said pleasantly, I understand you've recently helped your mother with some difficult decisions. Unfortunately, yes. My mother was suffering from severe dementia, and the family had to make some hard choices about her care. How sad. Is she doing well now? Brandon's expression grew appropriately somber. Actually, she passed away last month. The stress of her condition was just too much for her system. The room went dead silent. Even the conspirators looked shocked. Brandon was announcing my death to a room full of people who thought I was someone else entirely. I'm so sorry for your loss, I said softly. It must be devastating to lose a mother. It was a blessing, really. She'd been suffering for so long. That's when I decided it was time to end this charade. Brandon, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, that's a fascinating story, especially since your mother is sitting right here. I pulled off the gray wig I'd been wearing as part of my Eleanor Blackwood disguise. Underneath was my own silver hair, perfectly styled. "Hello, son." Brandon's face went white as a sheet. Dr. Morrison dropped his wine glass. David Chen started looking toward the exits. "Let me introduce myself properly to the rest of you," I continued, standing up. "I'm Margaret Harrison, Brandon's supposedly deceased mother, the woman whose murder you've all been planning." Agent Cooper's voice came through the room's hidden speakers. "This is the FBI. The building is surrounded. Nobody move." What followed was chaos. David Chen bolted for the door and ran straight into Agent Martinez. Dr. Morrison tried to claim everything had been a misunderstanding. Dr. Rebecca Chen started screaming about entrapment. But Brandon just sat there, staring at me with a mixture of shock, rage, and something that might have been admiration. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "That you were trying to have me killed?" "Since Spain." "That you were part of this larger operation?" "Since yesterday." "That you'd actually told them I was dead?" "Since about 5 minutes ago." Agent Cooper and her team filed into the room. Badges displayed, handcuffs ready. "Brandon Harrison," she said formally, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, and violation of federal racketeering statutes." As they handcuffed my son, he looked at me one more time. "You know, Mom, I always underestimated you." "Yes," I said sadly. "That was your biggest mistake." The next hour was a blur of arrests, evidence collection, and victim interviews. The other widows at the retreat were shaken but grateful to learn they'd narrowly escaped the same fate planned for me. Janet Morrison hugged me with tears in her eyes. "You saved our lives," she whispered. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Brandon receive a sentence of 25 years for his role in what prosecutors called the most sophisticated elder abuse conspiracy in American history. Amber got 15 years. Dr. Morrison got 20. The entire Golden Years consulting network was dismantled, with assets seized to compensate victims. But the real victory wasn't the prison sentences or the money recovered. It was sitting in my own living room that evening, finally at peace in my own home, knowing that I'd not only survived my family's betrayal, but had helped ensure it could never happen to anyone else. I'd started this story as a victim, a confused widow being manipulated by people who should have loved and protected me, but I ended it as something much more powerful. I'd become someone who fought back, someone who refused to disappear quietly, someone who turned her own family's cruelty into justice for dozens of other families. My phone rang. It was Agent Cooper. "Margaret, we just got word from Spain. The Serenity Wellness Center has been shut down by international authorities. They're investigating connections to similar operations across Europe." I smiled, looking out at the garden I'd planted in my backyard. Roses that would bloom every spring. A tangible reminder that some things grow stronger after surviving difficult seasons. "Agent Cooper, that's wonderful news. There's something else. The Victims' Compensation Fund has been approved. Between that and the civil settlements, you're looking at receiving approximately $8 million. $8 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having. But more importantly, it was justice. Proof that my fight had meant something. "What will you do now?" Agent Cooper asked. I thought about that question as I looked around my home, the house I'd nearly lost, filled now with my own choices, my own memories, my own future. "I think I'll travel," I said. "There are places I always wanted to see but never had the chance. And who knows, maybe I'll write a book about everything that happened. Other people should know that it's never too late to fight back." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my own space, truly alone for the first time in decades. Not lonely, alone by choice, in control of my own life, answerable to no one but myself. My children had tried to erase me from my own story. Instead, they'd helped me discover exactly how strong I really was. And that discovery was worth more than all the money in the world. Outside my window, my roses were blooming beautifully,